Happy with that?
We chair agree.
Right, apologies for absence.
Sarah, haven't received any apologies for absence for this meeting.
Okay. Minutes of the petitions committee, Mark Swinburne.
Yeah, my name's missing from the minutes of the last meeting, but I wasn't.
Good. Councillor Sesford.
Could be explained by Councillor Birthday Boy being here and not being here at the same time. He's in attendance and in apologies.
I'm sure I was there.
You're in attendance and in apologies at the same time.
I can have a look at it. It's a long time ago to put a chair.
Right, it's okay. If not, change it.
I think I pretty much remember being there. I remember it being discussed with you anyway.
Anything else on minutes? See nobody, okay. Disclosure of members' interest, anybody? See nobody?
Other than on ward member chair.
Right, item 5. Petition against ongoing planning issues of pedestrian safety and access to local services at Arcot Manor, the Fairways, Cramlington. Now then, you're the lead petitioner?
Yeah.
You've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes only to put the case, and then we'll hear from.
Okay, that's fine. Up until May 2022, residents of Arcot Manor and the Fairways have access to Beacon Lane via an unrestricted dirt path. This was used regularly by school children to go to school, dog walkers, runners, cyclists, etc. Without warning or notice, developers blocked off the path so that building work on the next phase of the development could commence with no alternative path being created for residents to access Beacon Lane. There is now no safe access by foot to any local services. We have nothing. I raised my concerns with Northumberland County Council, developers and my MP in May, but we are no further forward for enabling residents to safely exit the development by foot. This affects over 1,000 residents, with more residents moving to the development each month. The road off the estate is Fisher Lane. This has a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit and no footpath. There is a bend in the road coming from Cramlington just before the crossing, creating poor visibility for both pedestrians and motorists. Line of sight is even more restricted when there is a bus at the bus stop. The speed limit is often exceeded by motorists who race over the roundabout to get in front of cars using the near side lane before the road merges into a single carriageway. There have already been several accidents and near misses due to the poor design of the roundabout and position of the crossing points to access the bus stop on the other side of the road. Not all residents have access to cars and rely on local bus services to access local services, which include school children, at least one wheelchair user and a resident who is partially sighted. There are no signs asking motorists to slow down, no making them aware that pedestrians are crossing, making the crossing point unsafe for all users. There are more and more pedestrians seen leaving and entering our estate using the grass verges and in some instances walking on the road, often with traffic approaching behind them. This has included families walking with small children and pushchairs being pushed on the road. Rob Murphy responded to my concerns in June, suggesting that residents were mindful of their travel choices when leaving the estate. There are some people who have no choice but to walk along Fisher Lane. Is their safety of less concern? During a time where we have a cost of living and environmental crisis, is the only safe option for residents to leave the estate by car or pay a bus fare really acceptable? The situation is not impacting just a few households. This is impacting hundreds of residents, some of whom are in social housing and on low incomes. A bus fare to some is likely to be an unaffordable expense. Here's a statistic for you. If a pedestrian is hit at 40 miles an hour, they have a 90% chance of dying. You're expected to cross and walk on a 50-mile-an-hour road. How long will it be until somebody dies on that road? And when this does happen, who should we blame? The excuse and defence I have heard over and over again is that these mistakes made with the planning agreement, but that this was under a previous administration, so not the fault of current council representatives. How else do you improve or be better than a previous administration if you do not seek to change or seek resolution? 2 weeks ago, there was an article from Cramlington Town Council celebrating the improvements to existing play areas costing 180,000, which is great. But then residents of Arcot Manor and the Fairways make a financial contribution to Cramlington Town Council via their council tax and receive nothing in return. We don't have any play areas, but more importantly, we don't have a path. Parents are literally terrified to allow their children to access their local school by bus, especially during the winter months when mornings and evenings are dark, but they do not have any other choice. There are walk to school initiatives that pupils who live on the estate would love to take part in but cannot safely fulfil. Last month, all residents received a Travel Choices leaflet, which is this, from both Persimmon and Belfair, encouraging walking and cycling from the estate. We have no way of safely being able to do this. It's just a joke. We have so many issues with our estate, but more pressing matter is a safer crossing point and a path connecting us to local services. I brought this up on, there's just one other thing I just want to mention as well. I've brought this up on numerous occasions, but nobody's responded to it. Whilst the Section 106 agreement states that planned connectivity to Beacon Lane will not be there until there are 800 dwellings, there are travel plan measures attached to the Section 106 agreement, which clearly states under measures 24, 27, 28 and 29 that prior to occupation and from first occupation and then ongoing, a permeable network of pedestrian routes linking the development with wider services. Development that could to contribute to improve pedestrian links from the development to schools, town centre, PROW. The TPC will facilitate the establishment of measures to encourage walking, and the needs of people with impaired mobility will be considered as appropriate. I feel that in consideration of the travel plan measures, the Section 106 agreement has been contravened, and I would like to understand how this will be remediated. I trust that common sense will prevail, and I would like to know how soon we can expect improvements to be made.
Okay. Right now, I'm not sure who offers the report.
Judith will talk us through the report and then we'll both answer questions.
Right.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously we've heard from the speaker there what the issues are on that site. Just as a little bit of background, obviously this forms part of the southwest sector site. And permission was granted, about 15, 16 years ago for the estate and the area in general. And, it's been sort of divided up, if you like, into different areas within that whole southwest sector. And there's different developers come on board to develop the site. I mean, it's not to dispute anything, that has been said there, but as the report says to you, what the key issues in the report, in the petition have been mainly about the connectivity and the pedestrian and cycle access to local services. I think what the problem we've got is when this was originally approved and granted planning permission and the Section 106 that was put in place, the trigger points on reflection have probably come too late for a lot of what is still to go into the development. And a lot of that is still to happen. The trigger point, as I say, on reflection has probably been too late. And that's something obviously going forward and looking at other developments, we will look at again. And I think we've acknowledged that, the houses have been there before this infrastructure has come in. And obviously we're hearing the issues that's created now. The problem you've got is within the terms of the 106, that the developers are still working within those trigger points. So they're not actually in breach of them at this stage because, as the report says, I think it's in the background part, it gives you the trigger points. I think is what the speaker said as well. The funding in the case of the sports contributions, they're due on the 860th dwelling. Completion of that in relation to highways and connectivity, 383,000 has been paid in relation to improvements to Beacon Lane already. But again, these aren't fully required. Some of these aren't fully required until further down the line. Now, to try and address that, we've been speaking to Persimmon about if we could speed this up. They are amenable to that and have agreed that they're happy to look at everything with us to see if what is still to come in terms of the connectivity and footpath links, to see if they can be brought forward any quicker than what the terms of the Section 106 stipulate. There's two issues that I've identified, and one is that it's not safe for particularly the footpath access to Beacon Lane, because the site is still being developed. So they're saying there's a health and safety issue with that. And then again, it's possibly a funding thing on their part, but because they haven't quite hit the trigger yet, then we can't really push them to do that, because they're not in breach of that 106. However, as I say, we are working with them and talking to them to try and get them. They understand the problems, and what they are saying is that they are willing to work with us to try and bring these improvements and this sort of infrastructure forward, to try and make this, a more accessible site. That's really where we're at the moment. We're still having those discussions. The Highways Development Manager, Chris Mead, who was heavily involved in this, has left the authority. So we've got Michael Patrick, who's picked this up. Now I spoke to him yesterday, and he's you're just getting up to speed with everything and where we're at, and he's gonna speak to Persimmon as well and start developing a relationship with them. Same as what Chris Mead had, just to try and move this on and see if we can progress things quicker than what section 106 stipulates. The recommendation in the report is asking members to sort of accept our explanation there as to what we're doing to try and move things forward. But obviously, you know, if members have any different views, then be happy to hear those and see if there's anything else we can do.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah, can I just add to this very quickly?
Yeah, I'll go to Rob now, and I'm going
Yeah.
to open up the member.
Yeah, I think Judith summarised the position in the paper accurately. As a context, while this is an old decision, some of the issues that it flags up are issues which we grapple with all the time, in that because of cash flow on individual sites, members offer more, developers offer more money in 106s if it is tied to trigger points. In other words, so if they can not pay it until the 800th house or the 400th house is built. So it's always a call on getting money up front, or it's getting more money later on. With this one, we can't unpick the original decision, which is 2016, the one which actually bites on this one. So what the paper is actually suggesting is what Judith said, but actually, in addition to looking at bringing forward the works, it's actually looking at, are there any temporary works that we could agree with them as an interim measure, while the other issues of the final trigger points are hit. Because there are technical issues about putting in the final solution now, early, before the rest of the estate's finished. Okay, so just to recap, there's a balance on this in terms of getting the correct level of funding out of agreements with developers. We wouldn't perhaps arrange a 106 like this now, and we're looking at bringing forward the works as soon as possible. I have a working relationship with the chief exec and the regional directors of Persimmon. I'll put some pressure on them, and we'll look at both bringing forward and some interim arrangements for some temporary footpath works. But those would need to be subject to some design work.
Right, so there's 2 action points.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the local member, and I'm going to open it up. I mean, we've got 2 planning councillors here. Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, as you say, I'm a local member and I live the opposite side of the field from this development. So basically, in an ideal world, I'll be able to walk to your house, but I can't at the moment, like out Camden, long way, know the roads. All of this talk about with Persimmon and we'll work with them and this, that and the other. Difficulty I've got with that is twofold. Firstly, we had lots of conversations like this in respect of the St Nicholas Manor development, which is very nearly completed and well, roads closed at the moment. And much of that work was going to be started once the roundabout in your area in McDonald's was finished. We were told by the developers we'll get straight onto it once you finished your McDonald's roundabout. Well, of course, that didn't happen, and then COVID happened, and then got lots of warm words, but we never really got any action from them. They said they kept always in the post, it seemed. So, forgive me, but I do have a lot of skepticism when we say we hear, yes, we'll work with you and we'll find a solution. But what would be really helpful is if some of these action points had dates to them. Yeah. Because of, you know, it's saying we'll work with you, well, they could do it before they build the road. You know, you could do it, we could bring it forward 2.5 years instead of 3 years, which happening now would be the point if that was the case. So in respect, that's, if there's any action that can come from that, and what I would like to see is some of that stuff dated, because we are working behind the scenes, we are doing things. I am asking questions nearly every week to you about this. It's not about portion blame or what have we, it's about finding a solution as far as I can see.
And Barry, I just, I've not seen you, the point you've made. And what we will do is try and structure, even though this will be an agreement we negotiate, with Persimmon, we will try and structure it properly with a programme and dates. And I can bring a report back to members on that as soon as we've done that. Okay.
So, councillor Swinburne?
I've got one question, some observations. There's mention there of closing a path which is being used. Is that public right of way?
Judith, it sounds like an informal work, is it?
Yeah, yes, I think it's informal.
Okay.
I think there was a perception that it was public right of way, but I think when we looked into it, it's informal.
Because obviously, you know,
Yeah, it would be,
the right of way. From using that roadway that runs past the estate and that roundabout, I don't know whether it was designed by the developers, but it's very badly designed. The people, well, not all the people, the number of people who use it, as you know, many of us can witness, seem to have an aversion to sticking to the legal speed limit. And I've been overtaken on many occasions down that dual carriageway at 50, and using the roundabout correctly, you get overtaken at a massive speed on there. So if any improvements can be made to the design of that roundabout, it will be a significant benefit.
Yeah.
One of the big problems I've got is, you know, I really appreciate the fact that, you know, you're in discussion with, you know, like Persimmon. My problem is, as you know, Councillor Flux will confirm, there was a discussion where the developers drew back £1 million on the 106 money in, you know, for this development, saying they couldn't afford it. You know, and I know you said they look at each individual development, but you know, two of the developers there have got revenues of £3.5 billion. One of them have posted 250 million half-year profits. Another one almost £500 million in half-year profits, handed out millions to chief execs, and they're sucking back £1 million of Section 106 money, which is benefits to infrastructure in that development and in Cramlington, you know, saying they can't afford it. And, you know, well, fine, if you couldn't afford it, just walk away and stop building. That's my personal opinion.
Absolutely.
You know, the town needs it, Northumberland needs it, and the residents of that area needed it. So, you know, I'm less stepping about on this, go in and just say, we need this pulling forward now. You're having the money in your pockets. It's about time that you put it into the area and start sorting stuff out for, you know, for Cramlington and for the people who live around there.
And yeah, and in response to that, I would absolutely agree with you, and I share your frustrations. I know it will sound like a stuck record, but in the past we had a lot less structured approach to how we did 106s, and we've now done a full review of how we do that, the process of signing them. And the new local plan has looked at every development site and has costed up the infrastructure that we required for it. And that's been through a huge public inquiry, arguments with the developers, with government. And they played the argument they couldn't afford to do it. The government has said, this is an affordable ask now. So my view is that if we get schemes that come forward from this point on, from, you know, following March of this year, that where developers say they can't afford to deliver infrastructure, then we should refuse the applications. And because by their own argument, they've said, you know, they've got the land releases on the basis of an infrastructure ask. And so what members need to be, you know, to be clear in their minds about is when they talk about viability, that isn't just what it costs them in bricks and mortar and the land. It's for policy compliance schemes, and a policy compliance scheme includes the correct 106 payment.
Right, councillor Ball.
Right, I think most people in the room know how I feel about big developers. But for the residents of the area, you buy a house on a promise of what it's going to be like, right the way down to the infrastructure and how you're going to live there with your children, your family, and the people that are going to live in your home. And you put thousands of pounds into the stream of your home ownership and where you're going to live. And then the goalkeeper goalposts keep on moving, and I just think it's really unfair. And I know that may not be in planning policy, but when you're making thousands and millions of pounds in profit and you're just exploiting people again and again, I just think we as a planning authority need to turn around and actually hold these big companies to account, because if they're posting massive profits and they're still not delivering on infrastructure and everything else and claiming hard up and parish down and then having a big party at the end of the year to celebrate, I don't think it's fair on people that they're turning around and actually buying these houses. So I think we really need to start using our clout a little bit, because these are the same people that come back time and time again and keep on doing it. So I think we need to have a little bit more bite and actually say enough's enough with these lot. And ultimately, if they want plan permission, they need to dance to our tune a little bit, instead of us saying, well, we'll get more money if we do it this way. Actually, you don't get plan unless you do it this way. And just using a little bit more of our clout and stop being scared of these big companies. I think we need to lean in on them a little bit more and get some kind of timescales on this. So I know it says in here that we have like action points, but actually, is that going to be 6 months, 12 months, 3 years down the line? Because that still doesn't give an answer or a solution to the problems. And I just think there needs to be some kind of goodwill. And I went, if that leaflet come through my door and I haven't got, I would be raging. So, and I almost think they're mocking the residents on the estate. So I think they almost need to have a look at their con strategy and start speaking to the residents who have invested and are putting a lot of money into that company and they're not delivering. So yeah, I really don't think it's good enough on the part of the developers, and I think we need to use some of our clout to hold them to account on behalf of the residents.
Right, that was a point, wasn't it? Rather than.
I did have a question in the middle of it asking about timescales.
Yeah, and actually, can I just come back and second with the chair? Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with anything you say, and we need to look partially. I know this sounds like an excuse rather than a reason, but also remember when we're talking about being back in 2016, you'll see if you walk outside this building, you see the huge amounts of house building that took place in that period. So that's not only did we have an out-of-date local plan, but also we didn't have what's called a 5-year housing land supply, which means that the default answer to applications had to be yes, unless there's a very good reason not to. Not only have we tightened up the 106 approaches now, but the new local plan does effectively what you are saying. It raises the bar in terms of what developers need to deliver. And I think that's actually accepted by the development industry. And we are seeing a change in heart on new sites. But we do have legacy permissions out there. And this is one of them. And there are ones which haven't even started to be built yet, which are legacy permissions. What we will do, or the commitment to, we will come back to the members of this group with a timetable. And if Judith and the team can't get something reasonable out of Persimmon, I'll meet them at the highest level to get action on this.
Okay, I've got Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. It was just something Judith said that should be talked about. One of the reasons was health and safety. So I'll be interested to know, did they just say health and safety, or did they then go on to have some depth in that? And I think it's all very well talking about, what we can do next time, but this doesn't help the residents of this estate. And we really, I mean, I know there's probably no enforcement action we can take, but the health and safety issues are always easily overcome. I mean, if it's just a question of saying, right, we're going to have to run 400 metres of terrace fencing, then there's going to be a temporary footpath in there, then just do it. I mean, and charge them. Say, look, unless you do it, we're going to do it. We're going to charge you, and we're just going to pursue you. You can take us to court if you like, but this is what we're going to do. I mean, this is just unacceptable.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that, Jeff. And sometimes the phrase "you can't do it for the health and safety" is banded around too lightly.
Judith found something past that.
There's actually an email from Jonathan Trumbull at Persimmon, which I think was actually addressed to the speaker in response to something that she had sent him. And it says, Unfortunately, we cannot allow public access through to Beacon Lane at the present time due to construction works being undertaken. The land you had previously classed as private, and we apologise if this is causing an inconvenience, but it's necessary to keep members of the public.
So what I was about to add to it was, this is why the report talks about both trying to accelerate the delivery of what they need to deliver long term. And actually, because there could be some physical issues with the early delivery of that, not just financial, it talks about the potential for some interim or temporary measures. And that will be our fallback position.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it? You know, it's Caroline said, you know, you've invested tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of pounds in something, and they're just taking the mick. We just need to go to them and say, well, you find a path that we can temporarily install now. Regardless of what you're building around it, it must be possible.
Right.
But it's just because they don't want to do it, then it's just not
Can I
acceptable.
not speak? or
No. But I might. I'll just finish this bit and see if there's anybody else, councillors want to speak. I mean, I call this pond like planet. We don't know what's going to be on till we drain the pond and find out what's in the bottom. Every site that we pass has a problem that we didn't see lurking there, whether it's a pedestrian crossing, a footpath, or a Ponteland, the police headquarters, the want a bus that runs all the time, nobody in it. It was part of the 106 agreement, about £300,000. But empty bus will run till it runs out of money. Will pollute the atmosphere. It's just, these things are past at the time. And, you know, there's some legacy planning that we're gonna give us trouble. What did you want to contribute? Mark, is that?
Yeah, just wanted to check. I know what you said, it wasn't public right of way, this path that's being used. How long has it been used as a footpath though? Do we have any information on
I
that?
don't know for sure.
I assume it's been used like during the construction.
There was a, and if you look on maps, there's a squiggly line, which your resident, yourself and other residents raised with me and I raised with yourselves. There's a red dotty line on some maps. And allegedly there's been, well, I've seen police up there actually as well. I usually see police cars, but I've seen police horses go up it, which was there. I asked for the status of that. I was told it wasn't a public right of way and that it was being used informally or some reason it's being used. I don't know why or how it ever been used. It didn't went to some place, went on Beacon Lane, but Beacon Lane being quite full of brambles and such like the bit it goes down. That's what I was led to believe it was. I was told once I inquired about it that was not an official right of way. Whether that's right or not,
We'll
people
double check.
question. But that's what I've been told by yourselves.
You didn't use your 5 minutes, so I'll give you a quick,
I didn't use me 5 minutes. I don't know. Right, okay. So,
but that's not to say I won't cut you off.
that's fine, you can put us off, that's all right. It's just the thing that, like, I really appreciate you considering this and because it is awful and I have people, you have, and I've had awful messages to come to you but I have parents absolutely terrified that their kids are having to cross that road. You know, you can't, there's not even a sign to say pedestrians are crossing. There's not a sign to say slow down. There's nothing on that approach to tell motorists that there's a crossing point up there on a really poorly designed roundabout. And I accept the connectivity in terms of the Section 106 agreement and travel plan measures. I don't know what they are and I don't know why they're on there and they haven't been adhered to. So I would see that as a contravention of the Section 106. But you can have a path outside, you can have a path on Fisher Lane, which doesn't form part of the Section 106 agreement. Now that could just be just a gravel path, just something that is keeping residents safe. We're talking about health and safety. Health and safety, where does that stop at? Because you're putting people on a 50-mile-an-hour road and then motorists are going faster than that, you know.
Yeah.
So we need, the crossing needs to be better, the roundabout needs to be better, then we need to be telling motorists that people are crossing at that point.
Right, okay, I've got the point made. Councillor Bowman.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, what's the need for residents to cross Fisher Lane?
Bus.
What?
To get the bus,
To get a bus?
or to go to the Stony Owl pub.
Yeah.
But you have to walk on the road together.
That's the reason, only reason to cross the road.
We're here to try and sort, the whole point of this committee is that you get enough people to sign you something We then look into a deeper depth line, you know, just to try and find out what the real problems are, who's holding the log jam. We've heard that it's being looked into. You're gonna see, Persimmons Homes and try to see if we can get something out of there. I would like to keep this on the agenda. We don't meet that often, probably every 6 months on average, which will give us long enough to bring this back if required, if nothing's happened. Because if nothing's happened, then I think we need to have a further look at this.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's two Cramlington councillors here. I'm aware of where it is and what it's supposed to be, but if not, I'll say, right, we're gonna have a look at this. But rest assured, we've been given some advice here. And, you know, we all know that there are legacy problems on nearly every development that we should have looked at. But that's not gonna fix them. This is the job to fix it.
Yeah,
So are we happy that we move forward with?
Chair,
what we've done?
one point, just on, you mentioned about the no signs and all that in the roundabout. That's something I put in my LTP submission. Now, I don't know what I'll get out the LTP this year, but I have put it in as my submission. I was quite open-ended of what I said there, just safety features on Fisher Lane. Now, you know, well, you can have a really expensive safety feature or a sign that costs a couple of grand, you know, so I don't know what I'll get out of that or whether I'll get anything at all, but that I've asked that in the LTP, and we should hear in the next couple of months what the LTP.
I've got an LTP update. I was going through this morning, so I'll have a word with the team about that one. Can I just, Chair, so come. I think I'll say two things at this point, right? First of all, we're absolutely taking this seriously, and this is not how you would, like, if this was a new scheme that came in now, this is not how we do it. So we will try our best to resolve it. But I don't want to promise to take enforcement action, say, to where it won't work, but we are taking it really seriously. We'll try and sort it. To give members some comfort, though, we have got quite a lot of legacy sites, but remember, we grant or we deal with in the region of more than 6,000 applications a year now, and most of those get built, people live in them or business operate, and there are no problems solving it. There'll always be problem sites due to unforeseen circumstances, and the issue though of, you know, you'll be hearing next week at Strategic Planning Committee for another big residential scheme that was not handled in the, you know, perhaps in the most appropriate way when it first came in. But we are trying to work our way through all these legacy sites at the same time. But they were for a particular point in time. And that's no excuse and no benefit to you. But just recap, we are taking it really seriously. And I think the ones that we are doing now, there should be a lot less problems on the sites coming out now.
Okay, Chair, can I just ask that let's just get on with this. I mean, this is important. This is like,
We need the help of other people, that's the
yeah,
problem.
well, but if, you know, if Councillor Flux has got some money or he's put it in the LTP, we can't let this go on.
No.
Spend the money to put this path in. Just spend the money. It has to be done. And as far as the footpath's concerned, you just tell them, you have to find a temporary footpath. You have to find a route of a temporary footpath, and you've got to do it tomorrow. Honestly,
I would say I would have to back that up by saying, if you don't do it, we're going to do it and bill you for it. But clearly, given the fact it may be difficult to get the money back legally, it's best to get them to do it.
absolutely. But if it's a difference between making these making residents' lives flipping miserable, when as Caroline says, they've put all of this money into the house and they're on a nice estate, but they can't get off it because Persimmon can't be bothered to do what they're supposed to do, then I would just say spend the money and then pursue them.
No,
I just wouldn't.
I'll just give you-
worry about it.
Give you option C. I don't want to sound like just taking the middle road and everything. Option C here is that we use LTP funding to do part of this work.
Yeah.
And money that Persimmon would have spent on doing this, we get them to spend on doing something else later on.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Can we do that legally without going down it? Because
A very-
developers have.
Yeah.
Member scheme, isn't it?
It's within the realms of the possible.
I'm quite happy that we keep this on the agenda.
Yeah.
We find out what can be done by officers. We're gonna have more of these. I wish it was that simple, Chair, but it probably ain't.
Well, but you see, Richard, it's as simple as you want to make it. We can say whatever we like. If they choose not to do it, then that's their problem. We have to say, in the interest of the people that we represent, in the interest of the people that have bought these houses. I mean, and so very shortly, there will be this thing on social media about don't buy a house here because you're bloody trapped.
I'm already on a site that says do not buy for Simmons Home.
So, you know, so they could turn this difficult news story into a brilliant news story in 5 minutes just by saying, right, I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna build a path now so people can walk down through the safe bit. And we're gonna cooperate with the county council to get those measures on Fisher Lane in before the nights get too much dark. They could do that.
Not much time for that because they're gonna get darker.
I mean, what
But,
that,
you know, if you don't
Jeff,
start,
from
if you don't
experience,
pressurize, if you don't have a position, if you're just gonna say, oh, well, yeah, well, whatever, yeah, well, you know, you've got to take a stand. And this is a perfect place to do it because they're in the wrong and the residents are in the right.
Jeff, I agree with you. My experience with Simon and Beltway, when we go and do exactly what you say there, is that when you say, yeah, sounds very good, we'll get onto it, or we'll look towards it, and then nothing happens. Basically, you know, it gets kicked, the can gets kicked down the road another 3 times. I mean, that's our experience from St Nicholas Manor.
But we've just got to be more tenacious.
Right, this isn't a
Sorry.
moon festival. I'm gonna close this meeting because we've got officers that have given us assurance that they're gonna look into this. Quickly.
I was just going to say, is there any chance rather than waiting for 6 months, can we have a update, say,
Yeah, well, it would-
so not
it would
so
depend
waiting
on-
for 6
on-
months?
Democratic services when, I mean, here we are at nearly November. We're probably not gonna have a meeting this side of Christmas. And it'll probably be January, February.
What I thought was being said that, sorry.
I was just going to say the next meeting is scheduled for the 26th of January.
But what, stay on that, we're not, just because you said meetings, it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that, well, you know, if we've got a solution in 2 weeks' time, we don't
That's
just sit here and
Yeah.
wait for a meeting.
Yes.
There's stuff
Get
going
on with
on.
That's the point I was going to make, Barry. I was going to say that if for some reason the meeting isn't for a certain amount of time, that we can send a progress update to members of this committee
Yeah.
via email outside of the
Yeah.
outside of the
That'd be great.
meetings.
Can we communicate with the petitioner as much as we can?
Right, okay, I'm happy with the progress that we've made. It's not perfect, it's not gonna fix it until you've had those discussions, but it'll be up first thing on the agenda on January the 20th. Okay, thank you. The date of the next meeting is scheduled for then,
26th of January.
and hopefully we'll have a meeting then. Okay, thank you for your attention.